People often ask me, Tiago, what should I do to start getting ready for retirement? And while there's a lot to do, there's 4 big steps that you can take now to start giving yourself the best chance of having a successful retirement. The first thing I tell people to do is to be realistic about their retirement expenses. Most people fall into this mindset of thinking that, hey, we just need to replace our income that we have now and be able to live just fine in retirement. And that's a good starting point, but we found our clients required a little bit more thinking. For example, a lot of people think that they're just going to have less expenses in retirement. And speaking from not personal experience, but with our clients, I can tell you that that's not really been the case. One area in which we see people generally spend more than they were when they were working is in the area of travel. Perhaps you have a lot more time now than you did before, and there may have been a whole lot of trips that you've been putting off until now. We have clients that have quadrupled their travel budget within the first few years of retirement because now they still have a lot of time and energy to be able to go do those things. Another area that we see people spend more than they do in regular life is in the area of experiences and leisure. Maybe you want to visit the theater more often. Maybe you want to take more weekenders and just visit new places, do more things that are exciting to you than the regular grind that you've been used to. All of this typically comes with additional expenses, and so this is something that you're going to want to factor in to get the most out of your retirement. And here's one where people often forget. This is the category of one-time expenses. I am always amazed by how many one-time expenses there are in retirement. Things come up. We need to help our kids. We're taking a big trip with our friends. There's a new small vacation house that came on the market and you're absolutely thrilled with it. These are the things that you need to incorporate in your plan so that you have enough wiggle room to still be able to accomplish your goals, even though you're no longer earning a salary. Now, despite not earning a salary, federal retirees have what we call the 3-legged stool, right? That's your FERS pension, your Social Security, and then your savings or your portfolio that you use to supplement lifestyle. And as you're thinking through your expenses, you want to start to plan when you're going to file for Social Security. There's over 500 different iterations or combinations that you can take on Social Security. And so this graphic on the screen, we have a timeline under which you start. Your earliest availability is at your minimum retirement age, and your maximum is obviously 70 because there's really no benefit in waiting beyond 70. And you can see for most people, their full retirement age falls somewhere in that 66, 67 years old. That's when you're getting 100% of the benefit that you have paid for. If you wait every year beyond, you're getting an 8% bonus. And if you take it before your full retirement age, you are getting what's called an actuarial reduction by having access to your Social Security earlier. Now, just because it's reduced doesn't necessarily make that the wrong reason. There's a bunch of different reasons why you may want to take it earlier, and we're not going to get into those details in this video, but just know that it's a greater conversation. Once you've got your Social Security strategy, you've calculated your first pension, that's when you can start thinking about your portfolio to supplement the rest. But how do you know how much to take out for those needs, and when should you make those withdrawals, and how should you be invested to meet those needs? That's where the next one comes in, and that's to finalize and start implementing your short-term bucket. If you were to think about your portfolio separated into different buckets, the short-term bucket is the one that's designed to meet your most immediate needs, like your monthly expenses or any traveling you're doing this year, things like that. This is the bucket that's going to be supporting you when you first retire. The problem with investing in stocks is that they are volatile in nature. So if you're close to retirement or close to using any sum of your money, then you really need to be cautious about how much stocks you have in that bucket. The closer you are to using your capital, the more diversified and conservative you need to be for that sum of money. And this graphic on the screen is one I've used heavily over the years, but it's really good at helping people visualize how this works. The bucket we're talking about here is this soon bucket as well as this short-term bucket. Now, the first thing to note here is that these are just examples. This does not necessarily mean that this is what you need to do. But if you think about how much growth you should be going for in these buckets, the answer is probably not very much, because at any point, growth kinds of investments are going to be very volatile. And if that coincides with the time frame in which you're going to use your money, maybe you're selling at a loss. So really, we're looking at things like cash or cash equivalents, short-term bonds, money markets, things like that that can provide that stable cash flow that you're going to need to draw from. I often use the example of when you visit the doctor and the doctor says, we're going to need to prescribe you this medication to treat fill in the blank. How much of this medication would you like to take? I don't know, as little as I can possibly take to still accomplish what I need to do, right? Medicine often comes with side effects that are unwanted in the long run, and investing for growth can be very similar. Having too much of growth type of investments in your portfolio in retirement can actually be more harmful than good. What you're looking for now as you're retired and using your capital is stability and efficiency. As a starting point, I suggest that you consider using something like 5 years worth of your liquidity needs in these shorter buckets of your portfolio. Now, why do we say 5 years? Because on average, from peak to trough and back up again, a bear market, which is negative 20% or more, tends to recover in about 2.5 years or so. But remember, these are just averages. We've had as much as 7 years like the 2000s, or about 4 to 5 years in 2008, but this is a good starting point for you to do your planning. And the whole point of this is to allow you the liquidity to be able to draw from and use in your lifestyle if the markets reduce your portfolio value right when you go to use your money. If you have to sell your assets to use it after the markets are depressed, that makes those losses permanent. So we want to have some buckets that are more conservative so that you're meeting your regular needs. And it's important that you start to think of this ahead of time, because what happens if there's a bear market right as you go to retire? That's not the point that you want to start setting these up. You want to start several years ahead of time. Before I do the next one, if you have found any of this valuable or interesting, then do us a favor by hitting the thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, but you're looking at your own retirement soon, or maybe you're already retired, make sure you subscribe to the channel and check out our newsletter on our website. Next up, I encourage people to start thinking about the different phases of retirement. And what do these look like? When you first retire, you enter what I call the go-go phase. This is somewhere between 5, maybe 10 years of your early retirement. This is when you have the most time, the most money you've ever had, and you still have a whole lot of energy to just get up and go do things. Travel, do exciting things that maybe you've put off. As you really begin to phase through your retirement years, that's when you enter what we call the slow go years. Now, this is when maybe your kids are a little bit older, you may have grandkids that you're developing relationships with now, and we find that your priorities may start to change a little bit. Rather than doing a whole lot of travel, you may be spending more time at home base and really digging into your family. And as you continue through life, you enter then what we call the no-go years. So this is where there's not too much leisure going on. You're really spending more time with your family. Maybe you're spending more time taking care of your own health and your own independence. And the expenses that you would have spent on traveling and other things maybe are now going towards medical, or as you think about your legacy plans for your kids. And each one of these phases is going to require a slightly different plan to still continually meet your objectives. There's also things that happen in the no-go years that you want to be thinking about maybe even before you retire or right as soon as you retire. Things like long-term care fall into this category. The point is, your needs will change over time, and you want to make sure that your trajectory is always headed in the right direction. Your probabilities of success are always in what we call the green zone to continually be headed towards your ideal future. The next thing I encourage retiring Feds to do is to not forget about the silent retirement killer known as inflation. When people think about risk, they often think volatility. So people attribute investments like the TSP-C, S, or I funds as risky investments because they tend to be very volatile. But consider that not growing your money fast enough to keep up with inflation and your lifestyle is also a risk. This is where having too much in the G fund, for example, can really begin to be a poison to you in the long run. Now, this is hard for people to really internalize because it happens so slowly. In fact, most retirement plans don't fail overnight. These are plans that fail over the course of a decade or two simply because their trajectory was slowly moving off course. Inflation is one of those big trajectory changers. Imagine paying for things today as you know it with a salary that you earned maybe 10 or 15 years ago. You would struggle to pay them, right? The concept is exactly the same. As you phase through retirement, the same things that you're purchasing today are going to require raises in your retirement income to be able to sustain. And if inflation plus portfolio withdrawals are depleting your purchasing power, you have to make sure that your portfolio is doing its job to grow efficiently. This is where I tend to struggle with the TSP life cycle funds, particularly if you pick the life cycle that coincides with your retirement date. I'm painting a very broad brush here, but Generally speaking, I think that they are a little too conservative if you look at how much is allocated to the G fund in those recent life cycle funds. Now, that may or may not be appropriate for you. You need to do your own planning on this. But realistically, if you hang out in the G fund or similar kinds of investments for too long, you could be looking at reduced probabilities of success in the long run. So I hope this was helpful to you. And if you're retired or maybe 1 or 2 years from it and you want some help in your own retirement, we accept a handful of new clients each year. So check out our website if you're interested in applying. And until next time, stay wise and stay wealthy.